Thank you and welcome everyone for this fifth dialogue. I will be your host today and the moderator. We co-organize these dialogues with Bente Lilja Bye here, and we are supported by the GEO Secretariat and by the data working group to organize these dialogues. And I will start with the introduction to explain you what are these dialogues. So my name is Marie-Françoise Voidrot. I'm a director with the OGC Innovation Program, and I have a focus on initiatives related to Earth observation. I'm involved in several initiatives for European projects, but I'm also very much involved in GEO. I'm a representative from OGC in the program board, in the GEO program board, and I co-chair this data working subgroup that is organizing that. I am supported by the in-case projects from EE to participate in that. So some house rules, please, if you're not speaking, mute your microphone, because as you have seen, these sessions are recorded and they will be published on the GEO Knowledge Hub. So they will stay online for a long time, I hope. And if you want to intervene, you can raise your hand going at the bottom of the screen under reaction. You have something to raise your hand, and I will give you the floor if you want to participate and to talk. You are very welcome to do that, because we call that a dialogue and not a webinar, because we want to engage with the audience. So please do not hesitate. So as you may know, GEO, has published an open knowledge statement, and this statement includes several approaches to open knowledge that Bente will introduce. And so Bente will introduce this statement and the focus of the current dialogue, because this dialogue is part of the series, and we go through the different approaches to open knowledge. Then we will have a talk from Carl Benedict from AZIP about the data management training clearinghouse. That is also an open resource for discovering and reuse training materials. We will have a presentation from Ellen Glaves from the British Geological Survey on open evaluation, which is the second topic of this dialogue. Then Karen Ward will talk about the carpentries, which is a major resource and a partnership with NASA TOPS. And Niels will introduce the Location Innovation Academy and other academies OGC is working on. Then we will have, we hope, more than 30 minutes for the real dialogue to discuss about all that and brainstorm how this can apply for GEO. With that, I will let the floor to my colleague Bente Lilja Bye, who has been a member. She has her own company, consultants company, but she has been a member of the GEO community since a long time, representing Norway. She's the research director. She has been the research director at the Norwegian Mapping Authority, and she has been engaged in many initiatives for the benefit of GEO and many European projects. And this is how we work together since several years. And I'm happy to let you the floor, Bente.
Thank you very much, Marie-Françoise. And as you said, we are going to remind ourselves or introduce the open knowledge statement of GEO, the overall statement, and also the specific topic of today, which is open education and open evaluation. So the definition, just a few words on the definition of open knowledge. Coming from the Open Knowledge Foundation, that is, open knowledge is any content, information, or data that people are free to use, reuse, and redistribute without any legal, technological, or social restrictions. Now, how does this fit with GEO? So we are saying that open knowledge and organizations and activists have proposed principles and methodologies related to the production and distribution of knowledge in an open manner. And we are starting then with the open knowledge statement. It was initiated in 2019 by the then director of the GEO Secretariat, Gilberto Camara, who have been here on this dialogue series several times. It's well known. And following on that initiative, it was up to the working group on capacity development. And so it was considered very important for open science with capacity building, and particularly in developing countries. So it comes from, I think this is worth mentioning today, is that we are talking about open education and open evaluation, and it actually was sort of started, the development of the open knowledge statement was started in the capacity development community of GEO. So as a result of many revisions and collaborations around this statement, we landed an open knowledge statement in 2021. I think we approved this in the plenary. And the open knowledge, just a few words on that as well, is not only open science, because we are also using Earth observations in other areas of operational services, in the administrations, etc. So open science is included in open knowledge, but it's a little bit broader in the context of GEO. It is, we wanted to make it more closely aligned with the GEO mission and vision, and supporting then decision making. It's also related to the GEO work program and the GEO community, and the results will then, the results of this knowledge creation in the work program will be made accessible through the GEO Knowledge Hub. So that's a little bit of background for the open knowledge statement, and it's structured in principles. We will call them some principles, 11 principles. Open science, open access, citizens and participatory science, open data, which is also part of the open data sharing and the open data management principles. So it's an overlap there, you can say, or they are linked. Open reproducible research, open software, open infrastructure, open hardware, open education, open evaluation, and diversity of knowledge. So those are the 11 principles. We have already covered, you see these green signs. We have covered this and discussed this, what it should mean for GEO in earlier dialogue series. Today, it's open education, open evaluation. The last one was open software, open infrastructure, open hardware. What remains for the next is citizens and participatory science and diversity of knowledge. Now, you can find these earlier dialogues and presentations is of course available on the GEO Knowledge Hub, and you see some links here, and we will share them in the chat as well, so you can easily find it. We are producing, of course, these dialogues are recorded and can be used, reused, redistributed exactly as we described that the open knowledge is, and you find some links here. Oops. And here you see the program. This is the last one this summer. The next version of the dialogue series will be in September, and we are then moving, well, we are taking on the remaining topics of principles, and then we are going back to discuss more overarching issues and collect also the discussions that we did in ODOC. The ODOC is the open data, open knowledge workshop that just happened. The structure of all of these dialogues are a theory, so we present the idea, the principles, etc., and provide also some examples. And just link it to the ODOC, which was a great success. We found, I've summarized some of the findings there, linking or underlining the importance of open education. Open capacity development and capacity building was a red thread throughout all of the discussions that we had in the workshop. And you see here, I have highlighted the findings of session 2, which was titled Towards Open Knowledge. And you see that there's still a need of education on understanding of the data, and also a selection of, of all the different capacity building or education that you need to be doing. There's one organization cannot do all, so you have to make some selection. And I think it was Anthony Ria from WMO who explained that they had so many requests for education and they had to make a selection based on the mandate of WMO in this case. So that was an interesting finding. And then also the issue of curating the capacity development was mentioned in the session Towards Open Knowledge. But also, as I said, from the other sessions was also capacity development on national GEO level, increase the capacity building, strengthening capacity development efforts on how to use all data that is available, etc., etc. It was really capacity development, a red thread, and education, of course, is linked to that. Now, open education, as it's written in our open knowledge statement, is what you see here. We mean teaching materials should be released under an open license. Creative Commons is mentioned, allowing reuse and modification by others and following the fair and trust principles. Open education also involves teaching open science principles and using openly accessible materials, for example, data and software, as much as possible. I will add to this, based also on the discussion in ODOC, that the CARE principles, which we have developed or covered here, is of course should also be included here, but we can come back to that. This is exactly what is written, by the way, in the GEO open knowledge statement. Open evaluation. Scholarly articles should be evaluated in an open peer-reviewed process, resulting in public available reviews at the minimum. To foster the transition to a new recognition and reward system, a researcher's reputation and output should be evaluated according to the open science principles. In other words, by focusing primarily on the content rather than the journal's impact factor and the age index. And I'm sure we will hear more about this from the presenters today. But this is the background for our discussion today and the presentations. So with that, thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to listen to the presenters in today's program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bente. So as Bente has introduced, all these dialogues have a theoretical part, and she has done that explaining what are the dialogues, what is the focus today, and where it comes from. And then the second part is about implementations and examples of how it has been implemented by other communities and other groups before, to have some lessons learned and also engage. During the presentations that will begin now with the examples, you will have some polls that will pop up to engage with you and also to learn about you and prepare the discussions after. So this would be very easy to read and very fast. Keep on focusing on the presentations, of course. Carl, we give you the floor.
Great, thank you. And let me go ahead and share my screen here. So yes, thanks for joining us today as we're addressing this topic that really has many facets in terms of the development of materials for training, the communities that are often developed around those materials, the focus on a diverse set of learners. In the case of what I'm going to be presenting here, I'm going to be discussing a now fairly long-standing project that originated in the Earth Science Information Partners, one of GEO's participating organizations, to make more discoverable and accessible the vast array of training materials that have been developed and that are typically openly available over the internet. And specifically what I'm going to be talking about today is ESIP's Data Management Training Clearinghouse and the recent enhancements that we've made to the clearinghouse with support from the Institute of Museum and Library Services and development contributions from the Science Gateways Community Institute. I should also acknowledge here the significant contributions that were made, that have been made and continue to be made actually by Nancy Hobel-Heinrich, my collaborator in the IMLS funded project. She is one of the folks that was actually the originators of the clearinghouse from its original concept in ESIP to its current form. There are, throughout the slides, there are links to both the production version of the clearinghouse. At the bottom of the slide here, that's the dmtclearinghouse.esipfed.org. There's also a link to our development version of the clearinghouse that right now has a slightly larger number of resources in it as we are working on the pipeline for transitioning content from the development to the production system. But those are both live links that you can go to if you'd like to examine the clearinghouse and interact with the clearinghouse itself. As I mentioned, this is a fairly long-standing project. We're going to be hitting the 10-year anniversary for the clearinghouse in terms of the initiation of work just next year. And the first content was added to the clearinghouse in 2016 with a primary focus on earth science data and information, which is certainly the focus of the earth science information partners, and was initially supported by both in-kind and financial contributions from the U.S. Geological Survey, Data One, which was a decade-long U.S. National Science Foundation funded research and capacity development project, and the Earth Science Information Partners itself. And this is the original interface that was developed as a part of the clearinghouse. Starting in July of 2018, now pretty much 5 years ago, we started what I describe here as a 3+ year project to enhance the data management training clearinghouse. As with COVID and given the planned significant engagement with the community in helping to evolve and vet the continued development of the enhancements, engagement was a key element, and the restrictions on travel and meetings and such caused us to need to extend the timeline somewhat. And it also was needed to be extended because just as the project started, we encountered a new requirement to actually essentially either migrate or redevelop from the ground up the entire platform. And I'll talk about that a little bit as we address the open access to the content and capabilities of the clearinghouse for additional applications. But as I talk about the enhancements of the clearinghouse, we were really focusing in 5 areas. Continuing to grow the collection of materials in the clearinghouse itself, diversifying the content beyond the original core of content that was largely focused on data management training related to earth science data and information, expanding the metadata or documentation model for the learning resources, and based on that enhanced documentation model, then improving the search capabilities, increasing the discoverability of the growing collection of materials, adding an assessment component, actually implementing capabilities within the system for users of the clearinghouse materials to provide feedback on those materials that can then be provided to both users of the clearinghouse, but also to the developers of the learning materials that are discoverable within the clearinghouse. And then community outreach to continue to identify the key areas for development and areas for improvement for the clearinghouse. And as I mentioned, we then had the additional migration or redevelopment element that appeared very early in the project. So as we talk about what we were able to do over the course of the project, this is our trend line for the increase in the actual just cumulative number of resources that we have in the clearinghouse, with the vertical line sort of a third of the way from the left, indicating the point at which we started the IMLS-funded project in 2018. And there are two things that I'd like you to take from this. Number one, the solid area in black is the number of published resources in the clearinghouse. And as you can see, we were able to substantially increase the number of resources to now, depending on whether you look at our development platform, nearly 600, or in the production platform, 544 or so, a significant increase in the number of resources. But the other thing that I'd like to highlight is that red dashed line for added resources, because that actually represents the number of resources that we have registered in the system. And the gap between that red line and the black area is our backlog of materials that are going through our review and curation process. And that's an area where we are actively seeking community contributions to participate in the project to help us not just identify new learning resources that should be discoverable within the clearinghouse, but to also participate in our editorial process for review, documentation, and publication of resources. And I'll come back to that at the end of the presentation. In the area of trying to increase the diversity of the contents of the clearinghouse, we've also had substantial success, as you can see in the lower left corner. Essentially the cumulative number of learning resources that have been identified as being associated with particular subject areas. So again, our focus is on learning data management training materials, but in many cases, the foundations for those materials are grounded in particular types or formats of data, particular disciplinary questions. And that's the method we use for assigning the learning resources to specific subject categories. So we've been able to significantly expand beyond what started essentially as the physical sciences and mathematics, the large for the earth science data and information. In the upper right, we can, when we exclude the physical sciences and mathematics, we can see a little bit more nuanced trend lines for each of the individual subject areas that we've been expanding the collections. But the bottom line here is that we have been able to essentially broaden the number of subject areas for which users could find learning materials that would be relevant to their particular areas of research and data management. We also have increasing trend lines when it comes to the number of distinct keywords associated with learning resources. That's in the lower left corner, and the diversification of the target audiences for the different learning resources. So as we've been able to expand the number of target audiences, whether it's librarians, citizen sciences, data managers, policymakers, that's another dimension of the diversification that we've been working towards. And we've been fairly successful in developing fairly substantial collections of registered learning resources within the clearinghouse that can address the needs of, again, a very diverse population of learners for those resources. I mentioned earlier the sort of bonus task that we took on when the project started, and that was the announcement within about a month or 2 months after the beginning of the project in 2018 that the Drupal 7 web platform that had been used to develop the clearinghouse was actually going to be end of life at pretty much the exact end of our 3-year planned project, in which we are going to be enhancing the clearinghouse to bring in these additional capabilities and content. Needless to say, that's not a model that would be consistent with sustained operations. So we were confronted with a need to either migrate to an upcoming release of the same Drupal platform, or in our case, we elected to actually rebuild the system from the ground up using a combination of open source tools, using Python as the backend service provider, using Solr for managing the metadata and documentation, and then building client applications using a combination of JavaScript, HTML, and style sheets. This is based on a tiered model that has at its core the use of open application programming interfaces, allowing us to have great flexibility in how we can build new interfaces and capabilities that can leverage the content of the clearinghouse, the growing collection of metadata, the search and discovery and access tools that we have as a part of the system, as an alternative to especially with Drupal 7, we're more limited capabilities for being able to have a more open interactive model. So the significant benefit of this additional effort that we needed to make out of necessity was that we now have a platform that does publish a publicly accessible application programming interface that we actually use as a part of the user interfaces for the current clearinghouse web application, but that can also be integrated into other applications, say an organization that is contributing or that has content in the clearinghouse, or that would like to develop a curated collection of materials that they might present on their website. They could possibly use our search API to be able to actually present that subset of materials in their online resource in a way that is appropriate for their end user communities. So this is not just essentially a web application, but it's also a platform for publishing and sharing documentation related to training materials. I also mentioned assessment, and given today's theme, I wanted to make sure not to skip this, in that one of the very solid initial goals was to build an assessment capability into the clearinghouse. And in this case, we adopted the tiered assessment model developed by Donald Kirkpatrick. And essentially, this includes these four sort of standard levels that they define in terms of initial reaction to material. That's sort of that immediate, often sort of the post-conference survey that you might receive in terms of, what is your immediate feedback? But then moving through additional tiers that focus on learning, so having some sort of measure of actual learning objectives that were met as indicated by responses from the participants or other methods. But then even moving further into assessment of the resulting changes in behavior that were based upon those learning outcomes. And then finally, where we're ultimately going in many cases when we're trying to do training or learning is, what are the outcomes? What are the results of those changes in behavior, those learned skills and knowledge? And based on this model, we developed a capability within the clearinghouse to both have general purpose feedback, which we currently have implemented, but there actually is a full assessment management system built into the clearinghouse so that we can integrate new assessment questions and build new assessment surveys to potentially even be linked to individual learning materials. But we're just scratching the surface of the capabilities of the assessment system that has been developed, with the initial inventory of questions that are already baked into the system having come out of Data One's educational efforts in terms of building their assessment tools on top of this same tiered approach. So when we talk about the data management training clearinghouse as a platform, we really have to focus on what are the essentially the value added capabilities that the clearinghouse brings. One is the curation of the materials. It's not merely a registry of internet-based training materials, but there is a vetting, review, and documentation process that is a part of the workflow. So the materials that are in the clearinghouse have actually gone through a substantial degree of assessment for usability and understandability. Largely, I would say that, well, the vast majority of the materials in the clearinghouse are open access, free to use. There are a very small number of items that are also are fee-based, but the ultimate objective of the clearinghouse has always been to focus on the open access materials. From its very beginning, the clearinghouse has focused on community engagement in terms of the development of the clearinghouse and also contributions of new resources. The metadata model is a very rich one that includes essentially the core learning resource metadata initiative collection of documentation elements, extended with some additional materials. For example, the W3C accessibility standard has been integrated, as that was one of the areas that was identified by our community as additional valuable documentation for the learning resources. So we've integrated that into our metadata model. Our historic metadata for previously added materials have not been sort of enhanced with that W3C accessibility information yet, but that would be an ongoing community project. And again, this assessment capability so that we can both provide community feedback, community provided feedback about the learning resources to the users of the system, but also have that as feedback available for the developers of learning materials. In the clearinghouse, we seek a wide variety of learning resource types. You can just see an example of the many resource types that we both seek and have within the clearinghouse. So we cast the net quite widely in terms of the materials that we are looking for. Again, with the key focus on alignment with data management and analysis and visualization tools and skills. And finally, I wanted to close with the question about how you may be able to contribute, how you can join the community that is participating in the Data Management Training Clearinghouse. And as I mentioned earlier, we are still and continuing to work through that backlog of learning resources that have been registered with the system, some of which, as a part of the review process, will potentially not make it into a published state. But that's part of our editorial process. But we're always looking for new community members to join our team and bring their expertise into the publication workflow, whether it's through contributing new learning materials, registering those with the system, helping to develop the documentation, the metadata for those learning resources, or being able to actually help with some of the review and publication decisions. And those are some of the key areas in which we're continuing to work on expanding our community of participants. And the link here, the bit.ly/DMTC-interest, is a quick survey where you can provide your contact information and information about how you might be interested in engaging with the community and helping support the ongoing work of the clearinghouse. And with that, I am done.
Thank you very much, Carl. It was very nice that you went very systematically on the data life cycle of the content. And this reminds me that to call your attention on the recordings of the previous dialogue series we have done last year that go through all the data management principles to make the data findable, accessible, focus on the usability, the quality of the content, the curation, the preservation. And Carl has just shown that what we do this year is just building on what we have done last year, because the content of these academies or clearinghouse or resources are also data that we have to create and manage correctly. The next speaker will be Ellen Glaves. She's a senior data scientist at the British Geological Survey with more than 30 years experience in marine geospatial, geoscience and geoinformatics. And her role focuses on development and implementation of research infrastructures, which includes acting as strategic director of the integrated core services for the European Plate Observation System, better known under the acronym of EPOS. She is also actively involved in a number of national and international initiatives addressing many aspects of open science, including as a member for the Research Data Alliance and co-chair of the in situ data subgroup of GEO, which is also part of the data working group. And Ellen is currently vice president of EGU, the European Geoscience Union, having previously served as president during 2 years.
So yes, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to talk a little bit about open evaluation and perhaps just move on a little bit from what Carl started off with. I'm just going to quickly say a few words about open science, and as Bente said in her initial introduction, open science is one of the facets of GEO's open knowledge strategy, and I think one of the important things that I want to highlight at this point is that there are a number of aspects of open science, and today I'm going to focus on a number of the tabs that you see here. You'll see that there's already open educational resources, which Carl has already just talked about. And I'm going to focus in largely on open peer review as part of what actually this session is about, which is open evaluation. And I'm going to say a little bit about open evaluation as a key aspect of open science, largely because this is actually an area which has been slow to gain traction within the wider adoption of open science practices. But recent research suggests that this is becoming an increasing facet of open science, and it's being more widely adopted. And I'm going to say a few words today about why this is important. So open evaluation really, in a very fundamental way, is basically opening up what has traditionally been a closed process. But I also want to just quickly start by saying something about what is open evaluation. What does it mean? We probably think of it in the way of open peer review, but in fact, we need to think more about the wider context of open evaluation. And this is largely because we are thinking more and more about evaluation in terms of not just peer review. And I think it's important to say that open peer review, really, and open evaluation is important because it's an assessment of research outputs and not just publications. And it also is not just a closed activity that's done by a set of reviewers, quite often anonymously. It's a broader process that also needs community contributions. But it goes beyond that traditional research assessment practice. And this means that it also brings with it some additional practical, ethical, and social considerations. And I will actually touch on some of those in this quite short presentation today. Now, for some reason, after the poll appeared on my screen. My presentation is now stuck. There we go. So why does open evaluation matter? And the reason it matters is because it gives greater transparency throughout the entire research lifecycle. It means that we're able to find out more about how research has been conducted. But open evaluation is actually important because it allows wider validation and ensures greater reproducibility of findings. And I'm going to give an example from the in situ perspective, because one of the things we've been looking at in the in situ subgroup that it functions with it under the umbrella of GEO is looking at the importance of in situ data for validation of Earth observations, so satellite-based data. And this is more commonly referred to as ground truthing of Earth observation. And so the example that I wanted to show here is basically that we're using in situ observations that are basically referencing real features and measurements on the ground to validate Earth observation. This in situ data basically allows collaboration of remote sense data and also aids interpretation of analysis of what's being sensed. But open availability of high quality and fully validated in situ measurements are essential for ground truthing of Earth observation. And this is only one facet of why it's important. It's becoming increasingly critical that in situ data and large sets of in situ data are available to train artificial intelligence. And this is actually something that was highlighted very clearly during the ODOC workshop and the GEO symposium in Geneva a couple of weeks ago, because one of the speakers there emphasized that good training data for artificial intelligence is critical. And this is true with regards to in situ data that's being used to train artificial intelligence that actually is interpreting these satellite-based observations. So this is one of the reasons why open evaluation is important, because open evaluation allows a range of users to contribute to the checking and ensuring that data is as accurate and as useful as possible. It's also worth saying that open evaluation increases trust in published outputs and also research in general. And I'm going to say a little bit more about that. Just for completeness, I also want to say that open evaluation itself fosters good open science practices. And I will come back to that at a later stage in this presentation. But what I want to do is to look at open evaluation in terms of open access journals, because while open evaluation, as I said at the start, is actually more than just open access journals and open peer review, it is actually a fundamental element of open evaluation. So let's give you a quick definition of what is termed an open access journal. And it's basically going back to something that Bente said right at the start. It's making a resource available to anyone without any technical, financial, or legal barriers. And I think this is important because this means that everybody has an equal opportunity to access research, but also the research assets. And a couple of days ago, I had a look at the Directory of Open Access Journals, and there are currently just over 19,500 open access journals listed. But it is worth saying that the assessment of proportion of the total journals that are out there that are open access, it's actually difficult to assess due to differing definitions and different access models. And depending on which data you use, the actual figure for the proportion of journals that are currently open access is somewhere between 27 and 54%. But one of the big challenges for open access journals right now is the fact that they are quite often perceived as being of lower quality or less prestigious. And this is in itself becoming a challenge because some researchers feel that they need to publish in those very high-profile journals. But one of the key things to remember is many of these open access journals, they currently appear to be of lower quality or less prestigious because they have lower impact factors. But the reality is those impact factors are quite low because many of the open access journals are relatively new, so they are new title. But the fundamental message here is that open access journals are promoting open science practices by supporting this equitable access to research outputs and assets. So I want to move on to say something about another aspect of open access journals, which is building greater trust in the research. And this is the practice of open peer review. Now, open peer review is actually important because it's supporting a transition to open science, because it's making all aspects of the research life cycle transparent, and it allows people to actually be able to review all facets of the research. And if you remember back to one of my earlier slides, one of the key aspects of open science is being able to have more reproducible science, and also ensuring that that reproducibility and validation can be carried out by anybody. But I think the key thing that I want to mention here at this point, because this is a relatively short talk, so I'm not going to go into the details, I just want to say a little bit about the open peer review process as it stands at this point in time. There are currently two models for open peer review, and I'll be interested to hear from you during the dialogue part of this, whether any of you have any experience of being a reviewer. Because one of the key aspects of open peer review is that the peer review itself is made open to those who are actually accessing a journal article. But critically, the authors and the reviewers are identifiable within the review process, which is actually why I quite like this cartoon here on the right, because I think it kind of sums up the experience of some people. But there are some problems with open peer review, which we still need to address. Traditional anonymous review allows reviewers to speak their minds without fear of some form of retribution. And this is particularly, I think, a problem for younger, early career researchers who are struggling with that. They're concerned that this might have an impact on them. But also, I think the other problem is it introduces potentially bias into the process. But open peer review does provide greater transparency. And so that's why there are two models for peer review that I just want to mention very briefly. There's the post-peer review process, which is more the traditional peer review, but that journal article is then open for wider comment. But there's also another review process that's becoming quite common, which is the article is published online for comment, and people can actually put their publication out there prior to peer review. The community can comment on it, and then it can then go forward for a formal peer review process, which in fact can be optional. To facilitate this, publications can now actually be put up on something called a preprint server. And this is where people can actually put up an early version of their paper, and anyone can access the manuscript. And in fact, these manuscripts can be citable. And many of even the very big journals and the very prestigious journals allow authors to now print a preprint of their paper, but still go through the peer review process and have their article published. But let me come back to my original slide right at the start. And I want to come back to, why does open evaluation matter, and why does it foster open science? So, as I mentioned previously, research is becoming increasingly complex, and the research process is becoming much more nuanced. And this means many individual contributions to research are becoming more intangible and difficult to quantify. And for that reason, we require different incentives for people to adopt open science practices. And we also need to think about some alternative metrics. So we need to go beyond how many papers have you published in which journal. And it's also been shown that the adoption of open science is being accelerated because there are increasing numbers of incentives for conducting scientific research. But basically, we need to change how we quantify the individual contributions to research, and we need to think about what are those new metrics. I don't have enough time to talk about some of these metrics here, but really what we need to do is think about how do we reward other forms of research output beyond the scientific paper, the data, the software, the workflows. We also need to provide the tools and technologies that support open science, and we need to establish and promote independent not-for-profit research data platforms. And I think an example of exactly this type of platform is, in fact, the GEOS platform, which actually provides users with data, imagery, they can access analytical software, but they can also connect to different databases and portals that provide reliable and up-to-date user-friendly information. So I would encourage you to have a look at the GEOS portal, because the GEOS portal is not for profit, it's open to everybody, and there's a huge range of knowledge and information that can be used by anyone. So I'm sure I've already run out of time looking at my watch that's here on the desk. So I'm just going to very quickly summarize. Open evaluation is important because it supports increased transparency and trust in research practices and outputs, but it requires community effort to provide expert assessment and feedback. But it's fundamental for rider sharing and reuse of research assets. But we also need to think about what are those new metrics that for assessing individual contributions to research endeavour, because that wider sharing and research and reuse of research assets, people need to get rewarded for that. And in order to do that, we need funding agencies, we need strategic organisations like GEO to play a critical role in not only developing these metrics, but also making sure that people's contribution to open science and research in general, beyond journal outputs, is actually valued and rewarded. But I think the one thing that I want to finish on is to point out that the most important person in promoting wider sharing and research and reuse of research assets and actually fostering open science itself is actually the individual shown here, because the researcher needs to drive the adoption of open science and open knowledge and open information, because they will deliver the greatest benefits to the wider cross-section of the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hélène. It's very important to highlight that even if we publish online and that the delay between the research and making it available to make it usable by people is shortening, we don't have to sacrifice the quality. And we have to re-engineer the way to evaluate, even if we keep some principles like the transparency, the identification of the reviewer, but we have to evolve on this aspect to keep on providing quality and keep the trust from the audience. So this was very great. So NIRS is responsible, is working with the Open Geospatial Consortium with the COSI Collaborative Solutions and Innovation Program initiatives. He holds a PhD in geography and provides a combination of an extensive scientific background in climate change, data assessment, and sustainable development, as well as software engineering for scientific data processing and information delivery. This is one of the challenges that we need pluridisciplinary skills, knowing about science, expert in technology, a merge of all that. So this is why we have these different profiles among the speakers. And he contributes to OGC with his almost 20 years of research and scientific software development and climate service consultation experience from international projects.
Thanks a lot for the opportunity to speak here, and sorry for the hassle that I need to jump out, and that well, that's the way how it is in these days. We are hopping from webinars and online dialogues to the next telephone conferences, etc. You are very familiar with that. What I'm presenting you here is an academy, an online platform, an online academy, which is now being launched a couple of weeks ago or months ago. It's a seed that we are continuing to grow in the future, and we are looking forward for your opinions on how to tailor it and which direction this academy could drive. It is coming from a project that is called the GEO3, the Geospatial Enabled Ecosystem for Europe. So that European Commission funded project. And it is now currently in a transition phase. So GEO3 is running out, and there is a follow-up project, which is the Location Innovation Hubs. Also European Commission funded project for the next 7 years, or 3 years plus extension, with opportunity of extension to establish location innovation hubs in Europe. Therefore, or in that context, we start to establish e-learning modules, which has been meanwhile increased to an entire little academy. And I have the link in the chat. I'm putting that here so you can check out the platform. You can register there for free, and then have a look at the content which is currently available. It is scheduled in 3 clusters. So it's about data management, it's about service management, and data and service integration. And then every time focused on the needs of the scopes of GEO3 and the location innovation hubs, which is dedicated to the national mapping and cadastre agencies. So here we have a very clear defined user group and a very clear defined material that we need to learn and what we can provide. In the data management, there is a lot about open data, open licenses, but then also all the questions and difficulties about metadata and semantic enrichment, or semantics as a topic in general, which is quite important for the data management, and for sure data quality assurances, which are dedicated to the national mapping and cadastre agency. So depending on what they are focusing on, but here we are very often to administrative processes which are related to reporting systems, for example. So in terms of the United Nations policy frames. And then on the service management, so here that's a strong contribution also from the OGC, from the Open Geospatial Consortium, since we have plenty of open OGC API standards. And then here you will find different learning modules if you would like to get a better understanding of the OGC APIs. So here with direct use cases, we have applications in place that you can try out, and so there are also links to portals that you can access, and then also there are quite a lot of learning videos which are showing you the applications, how to set them in place. And then in the end, that's the both, so data and service integration. So that's then more for the applications itself, so for the national mapping and cadastre agencies, how to bring the applications running on their specific needs, and how to link that with the data and do the entire design of the application. And that's the mentioned YouTube channel, which is connected with that. So there are a bunch of YouTube's videos, and that very short, and that you can kind of in a nutshell, and without a strong effort, but within a couple of minutes or maybe hours, you are learning a specific topic and with the material that is provided in written text, the graphics, and then here the videos. New content, and then here that's also very like in seed that is provided by a template, so that we can make sure that the modules are more or less in the same way. But that's for the moment the start, and that in the future that will enhance, or the other sizes of modules will be existing as well. But for the moment, we have just a very kind of rudimentary way of a simple template to fill out, and then once this has been done, it's going to be ingested into the portal or into the e-learning platform. The e-learning platform. So we had been in Carl's presentation talking also about software that's hosted in a Moodle technology. So that's Python and PHP based software, and the modules which are there can then always be extracted, as well as also in the different can be downloaded and implemented in other Moodle platforms if that's necessary. So here an exchange of knowledge, or the knowledge producing modules, the e-learning tools, are possible. And then one big question is always about the intellectual property. How are you seeing that? That could be discussed later. And then, but orienting from the GEO open knowledge principles, that it should be published under the license of a of a Creative Commons, so that an exchange of the modules are ensured. And then here is a glossary as well. So in terms of evaluation, with that there is a process or a validation process over the geospatial, over the OGC naming authority. So new names or new terms that would like to be ingested into the glossary needs to go over an evaluation process, which is being hosted by the naming authority of the OGC. And then once it is there, it could be it is listed in the OGC glossary, which is actually not part of the academy, but part of the OGC Rainbow or link engine, and can from there be linked into any kind of academy which wants to have this kind of glossary. For the moment, the consortium, and here you see kind of it's an contributors of different institutions. So there is the consortium of the GEO3, and it's currently increasing in terms of the location innovation hubs. So that's a kind of a lot of more contributors are coming on board, and we are thinking also. This is the. I need to come back and said, and we are also having the approach within OGC that all the projects where OGC is involved in, or most of them are promising in their proposals to produce learning material, that this is going to be collected then in the Location Innovation Academy, or if you're exchanging then the modules in the various academies which are existing. So for example, this for SME is dedicated directly of establishing learning material. And then we have the Czech project, for example, which needs to establish an entire summer school, so a larger module, which is then taking around 2 weeks time to serve it, and then in the end with an evaluation process or with a questionnaire, and then a certification also in the end. And then you have for sure GEO3, the location innovation hubs. We have climate projects where coding sprints are taking place, and material can be reused or can be then ingested into the academies. And we already discussed then that there is a strong linkage in between of the infrastructures that we are hosting inside of OGC, and we said that's hosted on the servers of the OGC servers. So the location innovation hubs is or the OGC are the hosts, and then the GEO knowledge hub could be hosted there as well if that's an option to continue and being kind of part of the OGC Academy. Then talking about evaluation or talking about open evaluation. So in this platforms, you have a very detailed statistic. So you know very well who is doing what and who is a good student, who is not so active, and how many modules are being completed, and which is the more important one. Where do you need to set your feedbacks on that? You also have a very clear idea of the users, so the students, so to say. For the current situation, we have quite a lot of people from Spain, since the colleagues in Spain are very active in distributing the academy. We're discussing different languages, so that we also have languages, not only modules in English, but then providing that also in Spanish, French, and whatever is necessary or makes sense. Here we also have to take care about the evaluation process, but with language is for sure also a barrier and should not be underestimated. And then we have a clear feedback formula so that users can directly giving a feedback on how to improve, how to change, what is missing, and then what is necessary to enhance, or so that's the current interaction in between of the users and the providers of the academy, or providers of the modules of the academy. And with that, that's my little introduction to the ongoing activities that we're having inside of OGC in establishing a capacity building instance. Right, and with that, I'm giving back to Marie-Françoise.
So thank you, Niels. You have emphasized that OGC has started the process of academies with this location academy, but we also have other plans like this for SME project, for instance, which is focusing on an academy for SMEs. And then we see that we are going to have a constellation, and we have seen with the previous speakers that we have other academies. And so the poll was about how can we share and interoperate between the academies? So sharing modules, 54%, linking among them, 69%. This looks to be a minimum. Contributing to build a global landscape, 92%. So I think there is a large interest in that to make it more readable by the people, to have all these many academies and take the best, understand how to use them in the best way. Have a central publicity and defining a quality framework, evaluation, curation, and so on, 54%, because yes, we have seen already that the quality and the curation and the evaluations are very important. Going to the licenses, you have mentioned that into your talk. There is an unanimous consent. We like this expression in OGC to say that it should be Creative Commons CC BY. So crediting the creator of the content, the editor, but being able to share, because we are talking here about open knowledge. So this is great, and managed by module. That I think it's a great, interesting information. We all agree on that. So this will be a conclusion easy to provide to GEO on this aspect.
All right. My name is Karen Ward. I am the Director of Instructor Training with the Carpentries. I have a background in biology. My PhD is in biology. I've worked with bioinformatics training, although I'm not a bioinformatician myself. And I also have training in education and experience teaching in a variety of different settings. I took a slightly different angle on your theme for today, which I hope you'll still find interesting and useful. I will touch a little bit on the peer review process that we use in our curriculum development, but I'm mainly going to highlight the evaluation processes that are built into our training program and the ways that these processes have enabled us to rapidly adapt our program in the context of a partnership with NASA. It will take me a little time to explain to you who we are and what we do, and then we'll get into that partnership with NASA. The Carpentries is a nonprofit project dedicated to building global capacity in essential data and computational skills that support efficient, open, and reproducible research. Since 2012, the Carpentries has certified over 4,000 instructors who have taught workshops in 65 countries. These efforts are supported by over 100 member organizations around the world. There are some characteristics, features of our workshops. They involve participatory live coding or demonstration of the tools that are being taught. Instructors go slowly, explaining as they demonstrate. Learners actively code or execute tasks along with the instructor. Carpentries workshops feature helpers and co-instructors. The helpers support learners as they work. The instructional team shares the load and shares tips and tricks with each other, both on the technical content and on their teaching practices. Our workshops feature frequent feedback, which is a feature of, again, our evaluation process that turned out to be very important in our partnership. Within any workshop, we use colored sticky notes or in Zoom reactions to say, I'm okay or I'm stuck. We use frequent formative assessment to make sure that teaching is matched with learning. And we have pre and post assessment surveys built in that guide development over the long term, both for the instructors and for the Carpentries as a program. All Carpentries workshops are run under the Carpentries Code of Conduct, which is overseen by our community-led Code of Conduct committee. We have a collection of open curriculum. This includes over 40 official Carpentries lessons. These are software carpentry, data carpentry, library carpentry. These are our lesson programs. And these are lessons that have been gone through our early peer review process. We're developing a more sort of public-facing peer review process, but all of our lessons are collaboratively developed and maintained. And have been adopted by our lesson programs. There are also, now I just checked before this meeting, over 130 lessons currently in development in our community space. We have two spaces for this. We have our Carpentries Incubator, which is a development area for our community to work on lessons. And still sort of just beginning its development is the Carpentries Lab, which is a space for peer review. Once those incubator lessons are ready to be considered for a lesson program, for example, they are sent to the Carpentries Lab for a peer review process. All of these lessons are hosted on GitHub, and that's where that peer review occurs. We also, for official Carpentries workshops, we insist that they involve trained instructors. Our instructor certification involves a 2-day training, a 3-step checkout process, and overall teaches the concepts and skills to optimize the impact of our teaching with our curricula and beyond. Carpentries workshops can be organized. We strive for openness in all of our programs. So instructors can host and teach a Carpentries branded workshop for free as long as there's one certified instructor there. They are able to take advantage of our workshop websites and our pre and post surveys. We also organize workshops for a fee. That means we recruit instructors, and this is made possible by our volunteer instructors and the organizations and supervisors that support their participation. So a little bit about NASA now. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration in the USA is making a long-term commitment to open science and open source. They have recognized that this is a massive culture shift for a large organization, and the Transform to Open Science initiative is intended to take on the challenge of initiating that change. Where we see transformation, we see training. And so this is a natural fit for a partnership with the Carpentries, because our curriculum, training, and workshops are all rooted in a mission of supporting inclusive, open, and reproducible research. In this case, NASA is developing their own curriculum. We do not have the knowledge or capacity to create curriculum of the kind that NASA requires and the breadth. But they came to the Carpentries to provide instructor training for this program. And it looks like they will also be taking advantage of our Carpentries incubator and lab as well going ahead. We learned some things from this partnership. There are many ways in which the Carpentries instructor training is generally applicable. Our core content addresses all teaching contexts. So, for example, we discuss the features of cognition that affect teaching and learning. We discuss classroom practices that make it easier to teach effectively. We teach our instructors to offer formative assessment, to offer opportunities for practice and feedback while they teach. And we teach about methods to create inclusive environments that support motivation. We did have to make some adaptations to optimize our program to work with NASA. We talk a lot about live coding because most of our Carpentries workshops are focused around coding. However, the methods that we teach can be applied equally well to any participatory activity, and we're actually looking at changing the language in our instructor training curriculum to make it more clear that this breadth of applicability exists. We ask that they practice with Carpentries curricula, but the reality is that during training, any participatory materials can be used. So the NASA participants were able to draw from their own curricula to find sections to practice with. We do have a certification process that actually firmly requires Carpentries specific actions and the use of Carpentries materials. However, trainees can be required to attend the training, but not required to certify. We were able to adapt because we have evaluation processes that are baked into our systems that allowed us to recognize where adaptation was required and rapidly pivot to meet the needs of the NASA trainees. We receive learner feedback during instructor training because we train our trainers to practice what they preach and get lots of information on the experience of their learners. So the trainers could actually learn and adapt their training as they taught, which was extremely helpful in that context. We also have our post-event surveys that give additional feedback on areas for further improvement and also provide direct feedback to the Carpentries. And we have a monthly pre and post training discussion with our instructor trainers who teach instructor training, where they were able to bring their experience and the feedback that they received for a discussion with our community and with our core team, so we could talk about the best ways to meet the needs of this group and move forward. This worked very well, and I'm pleased to report that I think this partnership worked out very well. And we recognize that there are probably a lot of efforts in development out there that may be interested in this kind of partnership or others. So I hope this has been interesting and potentially valuable to you. But if you think that we can support any efforts that you may be engaged in with regard to training or open resource development with regard to training, we offer advice, infrastructure, peer review, and we do have a training program, a collaborative lesson development training program that's currently in development, and our peer review process is also in development. but is actively spinning up and scaling. We offer instructor training, which can be adapted to different uses. We offer a community of practice of people who really care about open science and open research, and a variety of community sessions that can be created and attended by anyone in our community. And we are always happy to get in early on planning processes to help figure out the best ways that we can support efforts involved. So thanks very much for inviting me here today. I've really enjoyed learning about the kinds of things that you're involved with, and I'd love to hear more from you if you have anything I can help with.
Well, thank you very much, Karen. We can very much see that there is a lot of lessons learned from your experience, because everything is very organized and pedagogy, but also you have noted the code of conduct where we probably can learn from, and the certifications and so on, and all that you have offered at the end. So I hope we will keep in touch. The idea of these dialogues is also to see how we can implement that for GEO, and maybe write down some implementations guidelines. So we'll have to look for lessons learned out of all these experiences.
I mean, that capacity building, like, so our instructor training program has two roles, right? It's propagating our values with regard to how we teach, but it's also teaching people how to teach so that they can share the skills in their local communities. And they're applying these not only to teaching carpentries workshops, but they're applying those skills to sharing other skills that they have. So that teaching people how to share, teaching people how to lead, you know, that's essential to that capacity building, because you can't do it all yourself. And so yeah, that's our approach.
Well, I really believe in this training of instructors or trainers, all the more that there is an issue that we did not mention until now, that is the language. And many resources are available in English, but we know that it can be difficult to approach new concepts and these technologies we are talking about that are complex. And the language can also be a bootstrap, which is important, at least for the start. Maybe not when you begin to be an expert and you know your field, but at least at the start. And so I think the only way to go through that is to train trainers and instructors. What do you think, Karen?
Sorry, I'm traveling. I'm working on one screen here. I keep losing windows. I wanted to share a resource that we have that's related to translations, which is our multilingual glossary for the terminology related to the content that we teach. We have also struggled with translation efforts, and we have attracted a number of people within our community who are interested in teaching in other languages. We don't have a particularly satisfactory way of dealing with it, but I can say that people have come to us, have learned in English about our processes and practices, and have been spearheading efforts in their own languages, in their own communities, to share skills using our techniques. Translating the actual materials that we use for training is another matter, and that's been a real obstacle for us to do in a consistent and sustainable way. We can't just create them, we need to maintain them, and so there are a lot of people in our community who are actively working on that. We don't have a solution yet.
And you have mentioned, Karen, the vocabularies, glossaries, and there is a European project named EO4GEO, who have worked on the glossaries also and the curriculum to try to match and understand what can be in a course, the description of the course, and match it with the needs. So there has been some works in some European projects on that.